Watched my parents burn alive on a Tuesday morning in September. At least, that's what I believed for 12 years. Then I saw my mother's face on a television screen in a Houston diner, smiling under a name that wasn't hers, living a life that had nothing to do with me. That's when everything I thought I knew about grief, about survival, about who I was, shattered like glass under a hammer. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fire happened when I was 16. Our house in Corpus Christi, a modest two-story with peeling yellow paint and a porch swing that creaked in the Gulf wind, went up in flames while I was at soccer practice. By the time Coach drove me home, the street was choked with fire trucks, their red lights painting the smoke in shades of hell. Neighbors stood in clusters on their lawns, hands over their mouths, shaking their heads. I remember running toward the house, or trying to. Two firefighters caught me before I got close. The heat was so intense, it felt like standing too close to an open oven, only this oven had swallowed everything I'd ever known. They told me my parents had been inside. They told me the fire had spread too fast. They told me there was nothing anyone could have done. My name is Kevin Martinez, and for 12 years I carried that story like a stone in my chest. I was raised by my uncle Rodrigo after that, a good man who worked double shifts at the shipyard and never once complained about taking in his brother's kid. He gave me a room, fed me, made sure I graduated high school, but he couldn't give me back what I'd lost. Nobody could. I learned to live with the empty space where my parents used to be. I learned to stop flinching when I smelled smoke. I learned to nod politely when people said time heals all wounds, even though I knew it was a lie. Time doesn't heal anything. It just teaches you how to function around the pain. By the time I turned 28, I'd built something resembling a normal life. I worked as a logistics coordinator for a shipping company in Houston, lived in a studio apartment that was too small but affordable, and spent my weekends running along the bayou or reading in coffee shops. I didn't talk about my parents much. Most people I knew didn't even realize I was an orphan. It was easier that way. On that particular Wednesday in March, I was sitting in a diner called Rosie's off Westheimer, waiting for my lunch order. The place was nothing special, just cracked vinyl booths and a laminate counter, but they made a decent burger and the coffee was strong. A television mounted in the corner was tuned to some daytime talk show, the volume low enough that you could ignore it if you wanted to. I wasn't paying attention at first. I was scrolling through my phone, answering work emails, half listening to the hiss of the grill behind the counter. Then I heard the host say something about a charity gala in Santa Fe, and for some reason, I glanced up. That's when I saw her. The camera panned across a ballroom full of people in evening wear, pausing on a woman in a silver dress standing beside a man in a tuxedo. She was older, her hair shorter and dyed a shade lighter than I remembered, but the shape of her face, the way she tilted her head when she smiled, the small scar above her left eyebrow that she'd gotten from a childhood bike accident, it was all there. It was all her. My mother. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Margaret and David Hartwell, philanthropists and founders of the Hartwell Foundation." Margaret Hartwell, not Elena Martinez, not my mother's name. I sat frozen, burger forgotten, staring at the screen as the camera moved on to other guests. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack. My hands started shaking. I tried to tell myself I was wrong, that grief has strange things to perception, that it was just someone who looked like her. But I knew. The way you know your own reflection, the way you know the sound of your own breathing in the dark. That was my mother. The segment ended. The show cut to commercial. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind racing in circles, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. How could she be alive? How could she be living under a different name? Why would she let me believe she was dead? I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and searched for Margaret Hartwell. Pages of results flooded the screen. There were articles about charity events, photos from fundraisers, a website for the Hartwell Foundation. I clicked on the photo gallery, and there she was again, smiling in front of a banner, shaking hands with a city councilman, cutting a ribbon at some kind of opening ceremony. And beside her, in almost every photo, was the man from the television, David Hartwell, tall, silver-haired, distinguished-looking. The caption identified him as her husband. I zoomed in on one of the photos, studying her face for any sign that I was mistaken. But the scar was there. The slight asymmetry in her smile, where she chipped a tooth when I was 10 and never got it fixed properly. The way her left eye crinkled more than her right when she laughed. It was her. It was absolutely her. My burger arrived, but I couldn't eat. I paid, left cash on the table, and walked out into the bright Houston afternoon, feeling like I was moving through water. Everything seemed too loud, too sharp. Car horns blared, someone laughed on the sidewalk. The sun beat down on the concrete and I couldn't breathe right. I made it back to my apartment and locked the door behind me. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and searched for more information. The Hartwell Foundation, according to its website, was a nonprofit focused on arts education in underprivileged communities. It had been established 8 years ago. 8 years. 4 years after my parents supposedly died. Margaret Hartwell's biography on the site was brief and vague. It said she'd grown up in the Pacific Northwest, studied art history in college, and dedicated her life to making the arts accessible to children who might not otherwise have opportunities. There was no mention of Texas, no mention of a son, no mention of a previous life. I searched for David Hartwell next. He had a longer biography, more public presence. Real estate developer, major donor to several museums, board member of various cultural institutions. Married to Margaret for 10 years. No children? No children. I closed my laptop and pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. People don't just fake their deaths and start new lives. That's something that happens in movies, not in real life. Not to ordinary people from Corpus Christi who worked retail jobs and struggled to pay their mortgage. But the evidence was right there in front of me. My mother was alive. She'd been alive this whole time, and she'd never once tried to contact me. The question that kept circling through my mind, louder than all the others, was why? Why would she do this? What could possibly make a mother abandon her child and let him believe she was dead? I spent the rest of that day and most of the night searching for answers. I combed through old news articles about the fire. I found the original report from the Corpus Christi Caller-Times dated September 15th, 12 years ago. House fire on Alameda Street claims 2 lives. The article was short, barely 3 paragraphs. It said the fire had started in the kitchen, possibly from a faulty appliance. It said 2 bodies had been recovered from the scene. It said the victims were identified as Roberto and Elena Martinez, survived by 1 son. 2 bodies. They'd found 2 bodies. I pulled up the death certificates next, documents I'd only looked at once before, years ago, when I'd needed them for some legal matter I couldn't even remember now. There they were, official and stamped and seemingly legitimate. Cause of death, smoke inhalation and thermal injuries. Date of death, September 15th. If my mother was alive, then who had died in that fire? The question opened up a chasm beneath me. I felt like I was falling and there was nothing to grab onto. Every assumption I'd built my life on was suddenly suspect. If this was a lie, what else was? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop, a notebook, and 3 cups of coffee that went cold before I touched them. I wrote down everything I knew, everything I remembered, about the fire, about my parents, about the weeks and months that followed. I remembered my uncle coming to get me from the neighbor's house where I'd spent that first night. I remembered him pale and shaken, barely able to look at me. I remembered the funeral, closed caskets draped with white flowers. I remembered standing in the cemetery in an ill-fitting black suit borrowed from someone, watching those caskets lowered into the ground while my uncle's hand gripped my shoulder. Had he known? Had Uncle Rodrigo been part of this? The thought made me sick. He'd raised me. He'd been the only family I had left. If he'd lied to me, if he'd helped cover this up, then I had no one. I was completely alone. I pushed that thought away. I couldn't deal with it yet. First, I needed more information. Over the next 3 days, I became obsessed. I called in sick to work, something I never did, and spent every waking hour researching. I found more photos of Margaret and David Hartwell. I watched videos of them speaking at events. I studied her mannerisms, her voice in the few clips where I could hear her speak. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. It was definitely my mother. I would stake my life on it. I tried to find information about her past, about where Margaret Hartwell had come from before she married David, but there was almost nothing. No social media presence before 8 years ago, no college records that I could access, no digital footprint at all until suddenly there she was, appearing fully formed as the wife of a wealthy philanthropist. David Hartwell, on the other hand, had a well-documented history. Born in Connecticut, educated at Yale, inherited his father's real estate business and expanded it successfully. First marriage ended in divorce 20 years ago, no children from that marriage either. Then 8 years ago, he'd remarried to a woman named Margaret whose past seemed to have been carefully erased. On the 4th day, I made a decision. I needed to see her in person. I needed to look her in the eye and confirm what I already knew. And then I needed answers. The Hartwell Foundation's website listed their main office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A quick search showed me they were hosting a fundraising event the following weekend, a gallery opening at some art space downtown. The event was open to the public, though donations were encouraged. I bought a plane ticket. I requested time off work, a week of vacation I'd been saving. I told my supervisor I needed to visit family. It wasn't entirely a lie. The flight to Albuquerque was short, barely 2 hours, but it felt endless. I kept thinking about what I would say to her. I rehearsed conversations in my head, imagined her reactions. Sometimes I pictured her breaking down in tears, explaining that she'd had no choice, that she'd been protecting me from something terrible. Other times I saw her face go cold and blank, denying everything, calling security to remove me. I rented a car at the airport and drove north to Santa Fe as the sun set over the desert. The landscape was so different from Texas, all red rock and pinyon pine instead of flat coastal plains. The air smelled like sage and smoke from wood-burning stoves. By the time I reached the city, it was dark and the temperature had dropped sharply. I checked into a cheap motel on the south side of town and lay awake most of the night, watching the digital clock count down the hours until morning. When gray light finally started seeping through the curtains, I got up, showered, and tried to eat the complimentary breakfast in the motel lobby. The coffee tasted like hot water filtered through cardboard, and the pastries were stale, but I forced down what I could. I needed to keep my strength up. The gallery opening wasn't until evening, but I drove into town early to get my bearings. Santa Fe was smaller than I'd expected, the downtown area clustered around a plaza with low adobe buildings and narrow streets. Everything had that southwestern aesthetic, earth tones and rounded corners and strings of chili peppers hanging from doorways. It felt like a different country. I found the gallery where the event would be held, a converted warehouse space in the rail yard district. A banner outside announced the opening, New Visions Youth Art Showcase, sponsored by the Hartwell Foundation. I sat in my car across the street and watched people come and go, setting up for the evening. None of them were her. The hours crawled by. I drove around the city, trying to distract myself, but I couldn't focus on anything. I grabbed lunch at a food truck and barely tasted it. I parked near the plaza and watched tourists browse shops selling turquoise jewelry and Navajo rugs. The whole time, my mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why did she leave? Why did she let me think she was dead? What could possibly justify that? By 6 o'clock, I was back at the gallery, watching well-dressed people begin to arrive. The parking lot filled with expensive cars. Through the large windows, I could see the space inside transforming, filling with people holding wine glasses and admiring artwork hung on white walls. I waited until nearly 7 before I went in. I'd dressed carefully, the only sport coat I owned over a button-down shirt, trying to look like I belonged. At the door, a young woman with a tablet checked me in and handed me a program. I made a donation, $20 I couldn't really afford, and stepped inside. The gallery was crowded and warm, filled with the buzz of conversation and soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. The walls were covered with paintings and drawings created by children, bright splashes of color and earnest attempts at perspective. Under other circumstances, I might have found it touching. I moved through the crowd slowly, scanning faces. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. And then, near the back of the gallery, I saw her. She was standing in front of a large canvas, talking to a couple in expensive-looking clothes. She wore a simple black dress and silver jewelry, her hair pulled back in a way I'd never seen her wear it before. But it was her, my mother, Elena Martinez, Margaret Hartwell, whatever name she was using now. I stood frozen, unable to move forward or retreat. I just watched her, memorizing the way she gestured when she talked, the way she smiled, the way she was alive and breathing and real when she was supposed to be ash and bone in a grave in Corpus Christi. She must have felt me staring, because suddenly she looked up. Our eyes met across the crowded gallery. I watched the color drain from her face. Her smile faltered. The wine glass in her hand tilted dangerously, and I thought she might drop it. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the space between us filled with 12 years of grief and lies and questions that had no answers. Then she turned away. She said something to the couple she'd been talking to, excused herself, and walked quickly toward a door marked "Staff Only" at the back of the gallery. I followed. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the annoyed looks from people I bumped into, keeping my eyes locked on that door. When I reached it, I didn't hesitate. I pushed it open and found myself in a narrow hallway lined with storage racks holding additional artwork. She was standing at the end of the hall, one hand pressed against the wall like she needed it for support. When she heard me, she turned. We stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What do you say to a ghost? What do you say to someone who chose to die rather than be your mother? She spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kevin." Hearing my name in her voice after 12 years broke something loose inside me. All the careful control I'd been maintaining shattered. "You're alive," I said. It came out flat, stating the obvious, but it was all I could manage. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "I can explain." Explain? The word came out sharper than I intended. "You let me think you were dead. I buried you. I grieved for you. I spent 12 years believing both my parents burned to death in our house. And you were here the whole time, living some completely different life with some completely different person, and you never once, not once, tried to reach out to me." "I couldn't," she said, and the tears spilled over now, running down her cheeks. "Kevin, you have to understand, I couldn't." "Why not? What could possibly make that okay?" She glanced back toward the door, anxious. "Not here. We can't talk here. There are too many people." "I don't care about the people." "Please." She reached out as if to touch my arm, then pulled back. "Give me 2 hours. Let me get through this event. Then we can talk properly. I'll tell you everything." "Tell me now." "I can't. Not here." "Kevin, please. 2 hours. There's a coffee shop on Palace Avenue, Milagro Coffee. Meet me there at 9:30. I promise I'll explain everything." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake the truth out of her right then and there. But she looked terrified, her eyes darting to the door again, and something in her fear made me hesitate. 9:30, I said. "If you're not there, I'm going to the police." She nodded quickly. "I'll be there, I promise." Then she was gone, slipping back through the door into the gallery, leaving me alone in the hallway with my racing heart and shaking hands. I didn't stay for the rest of the event. I walked back to my car and sat behind the wheel, trying to process what had just happened. I'd found her. After 12 years, I'd found my mother, and she was alive. But instead of feeling relief or joy, all I felt was a cold, spreading fury. She'd chosen this. Whatever the reason, whatever the explanation, she'd made a choice to let me suffer. That was unforgivable. The 2 hours until 9:30 stretched out impossibly. I drove aimlessly through Santa Fe's streets, past galleries and restaurants and tourists taking photos in the plaza. The city felt surreal, like a movie set, beautiful and fake. At 9:20, I parked near the coffee shop and waited. Through the window, I could see it was nearly empty, just a barista behind the counter and one person working on a laptop in the corner. I stayed in the car, watching the street, half convinced she wouldn't show. But at 9:28, a black Mercedes pulled up and she got out. She'd changed out of the dress into jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, less polished than she had at the gallery. More like the mother I remembered. I got out of the car and followed her inside. She ordered tea at the counter, and I asked for coffee I didn't want. We sat at a corner table as far from the other customer as possible. The barista put in earbuds and started wiping down the espresso machine, giving us privacy. My mother wrapped her hands around her mug but didn't drink. She looked at me, then away, then back again, as if she didn't know where to start. "You look so much like your father," she said finally. "Don't." The word came out harsher than I meant it. "Don't make small talk, just tell me the truth." She took a shaky breath. "The fire was real. The house really burned. But your father and I weren't in it." "Then who died?" "No one." She looked down at her hands. "The bodies they found, they weren't real. They were, I don't know what they were, synthetic or something. Your father arranged it all. I didn't know about it until the day before it happened." I stared at her. "Dad arranged his own fake death?" "Yes." "Why?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "Your father worked for some very dangerous people, Kevin. Not at the store. That was just cover. He was involved in things, financial things, illegal things. He was a bookkeeper for people who don't forgive mistakes or let you walk away clean." The words didn't make sense. I tried to picture my father, Roberto Martinez, who'd managed a discount furniture store and spent his weekends watching baseball and fixing things around the house. A criminal? A man involved with dangerous people? "You're lying." "I wish I was." She finally met my eyes. "He got in too deep. He knew things he shouldn't have known, had access to records that could put very powerful people in prison. When he tried to get out, they made it clear that wasn't an option. So he made a deal. He'd disappear, take certain information with him as insurance, and they'd let him live as long as he never surfaced again." "And you just went along with this?" "I didn't have a choice. They made it very clear that if I didn't disappear too, I'd be used as leverage against him. And you," she paused, "you were supposed to come with us." The world tilted. "What?" "That was the plan. Your father was going to pick you up from soccer practice that day, tell you we were taking an emergency trip, and drive straight to the safe house. We were all supposed to disappear together. But something went wrong. He had to move the timeline up, and there wasn't time to get you. So he made the impossible choice. He let you think we were dead so that you'd be safe." I shook my head, rejecting every word. "If I was in danger, you should have taken me with you. You should have protected me." "We did protect you, don't you see? As long as you believed we were dead, you were useless to them. You couldn't tell them anything. You couldn't be used against us. Your grief kept you safe." "My grief destroyed me." "Your grief destroyed you," she repeated softly, and there was such pain in her voice that for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I know. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think there's been a single day in the last 12 years when I haven't thought about you, wondered how you were, wished things could have been different? If you cared so much, you could have found a way to contact me." "No," she shook her head firmly. "I couldn't. Any contact would have put you in danger. These people, Kevin, they have resources you can't imagine. They monitor everything: bank accounts, phone records, email. If I'd reached out to you even once, they would have known, and then you would have become a target. So you just abandoned me? I saved your life." Her voice rose slightly, then she caught herself and lowered it again. "Your father and I made an impossible choice. Live with the guilt of leaving you behind, or risk getting you killed. We chose your life over our own happiness. We chose your safety over everything." I wanted to believe her. Some part of me, the part that was still 16 years old and standing in front of a burning house, wanted desperately to believe that there was a good reason for all of this. But 12 years of grief had built walls inside me that her words couldn't easily penetrate. "Where is he?" I asked. "Where's Dad?" Her face crumpled. "He died. Really died, I mean. 5 years ago. Heart attack. I was with him when it happened. He was gone before the ambulance arrived." 5 years. My father had been alive for 7 years after I'd buried an empty casket, and I'd never known. I'd never gotten to say goodbye. Not really. "He thought about you constantly," she continued, tears streaming down her face now. "He kept a photo of you hidden in his wallet, your soccer team photo from your sophomore year. He'd take it out sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking and just stare at it. The guilt ate him alive, Kevin. I think in some ways it's what killed him. The stress, the constant fear, the knowledge of what he'd done to you." "Good," I said, and I meant it. The cruelty of the word hung in the air between us. She flinched but didn't look away. "You have every right to hate us, hate me. I understand that. But I need you to know that everything we did because we loved you, because your life mattered more than anything. Don't talk to me about love. You don't get to use that word. Love doesn't abandon a child. Love doesn't fake its own death and start a new life halfway across the country with a new husband and pretend the past never existed." "David doesn't know," she said quietly. "About you, about Texas, about any of it. As far as he's concerned, I'm exactly who I told him I am. A woman with a sad past she doesn't like to talk about. He thinks my parents died when I was young. He thinks I have no family left. That must be convenient for you. It's necessary. Kevin, these people, the ones your father was involved with, they're still out there. Some of them are in prison now, but not all of them. The ones who aren't, they have long memories. If they knew I was still alive, if they knew you existed, if they knew there was anyone connected to your father who might still have information or could testify against them, we'd all be in danger. My being dead, it protects all of us." I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything she was telling me. It sounded insane, like something from a thriller novel, but the evidence was right in front of me. My mother had faked her death. She was living under an assumed identity. Something had driven her to that extreme. "What kind of people?" I asked. "Who was Dad working for?" She glanced around the coffee shop, even though it was nearly empty now. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Money launderers, drug traffickers, people who move illegal cash through legitimate businesses. Your father kept the books. He made dirty money look clean. He was good at it, too good, and that made him valuable. But it also made him dangerous to them because he knew everything, every transaction, every shell company, every name. So why didn't he go to the police? Why didn't he turn them in?" He tried. She wrapped her arms around herself. "Not directly, but he started making copies of records, documenting things. He was planning to cut a deal with federal prosecutors, enter witness protection properly, bring us with him. But someone found out. They came to our house one night when you were sleeping over at a friend's. They didn't threaten us with words. They just left a single photograph on our kitchen table. A picture of you at soccer practice, taken with a telephoto lens. The message was clear. I felt cold all over. When was this? 3 weeks before the fire. After that, your father knew there was no way out through official channels. These people had law enforcement connections. They'd know if he tried to cooperate with police. So he started planning something else. The fire, the fake deaths, the new identities. He had contacts of his own from his years in that world. People who could make it happen, for a price. And Uncle Rodrigo? Did he know?" She shook her head. "No. Rodrigo thought we died just like everyone else did. Your father wanted it that way. The fewer people who knew the truth, the safer everyone would be. I thought about my uncle, about the way he'd looked at those caskets being lowered into the ground. The grief in his face had been real. He'd lost his brother, or so he believed. And he'd taken in his orphaned nephew without hesitation, raised him as his own. Whatever else was true, whatever lies had been told, my uncle had been genuine. So what now? I asked. I found you. The secret's out. What happens now? My mother looked at me with such profound sadness that for a moment I saw past the anger and hurt to the woman I'd loved as a child. Nothing changes, she said. You go back to Houston. You live your life. You forget you ever saw me. Forget? I almost laughed. You think I can just forget this? You have to. Kevin, if anyone finds out I'm alive, if anyone connects Margaret Hartwell to Elena Martinez, we're both dead. David too, probably, just for being associated with me. And you. They'll come after you to get to me, or to make sure you can't tell anyone what your father knew. I don't know what he knew. I was 16 when he died. When he faked his death, I mean. But they won't believe that. They'll assume he told you something, left something with you. They'll assume you're a threat, and they'll eliminate you. The words should have sounded melodramatic, but somehow they didn't. Maybe it was the matter-of-fact way she said them. Maybe it was the genuine fear in her eyes. Or maybe it was because somewhere deep down, I knew she was telling the truth. So that's it, I said. I'm just supposed to walk away, pretend this conversation never happened, go back to my apartment and my job and my small, ordinary life, and never think about the fact that my mother is alive? Yes. And what do you get? You get to stay here in your nice house with your nice husband and your nice charity foundation, living a life built on lies? I get to stay alive, she said quietly, and so do you. That's all that matters. We sat in silence for a long moment. The barista had disappeared into a back room. The other customer had left. We were alone in the coffee shop, just the two of us and 12 years of ghosts. I have something for you, my mother said finally. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Your father put this together. Before he died, I mean. He made me promise that if you ever found out the truth, I'd give it to you. I took the envelope but didn't open it. It was heavy, stuffed full of something. What is it? Letters. One for every birthday he missed, every Christmas, every graduation, every milestone. He wrote them all, dated them, sealed them. He never sent them, obviously, but he wrote them anyway. And there's something else in there too. Information, names, account numbers, documentation of everything he was involved in. He wanted you to have it, just in case. Just in case what? Just in case something happened to me. Just in case you ever needed leverage or protection. I don't know. He didn't explain his reasoning. He just made me promise. I held the envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of it. Inside were words my father had written to me, messages sent across an impossible distance. Part of me wanted to tear it open right there and read every word. Part of me wanted to throw it away unread. There's money too, she said. Not in that envelope, but there's an account. Your father set it up before he died, in your name, with instructions that you'd only get access to it if you ever learned the truth. It's not a fortune, but it's enough. Enough to start over somewhere if you need to, or to hire protection if something goes wrong. How much? A little over $200,000. I stared at her. That was more money than I'd made in 5 years of working. He took it from them, she continued, from the people he worked for. A little at a time over the years, small enough amounts that they wouldn't notice. It was his insurance policy, and now it's yours. I don't want their blood money. Take it anyway. You might need it. And Kevin, if anything ever happens, if you ever feel like you're in danger, or someone's watching you, or anything seems wrong, there's a phone number in that envelope. Call it. The person on the other end will know what to do. Who? Someone your father trusted. One of the people who helped him disappear. They owe us, and they'll help you if you need it. She stood up then, collecting her purse, preparing to leave. To walk out of my life again, this time, maybe forever. Wait, I said. Just tell me one thing. Did you ever love me, or was I just another complication in your criminal life? The question seemed to physically hurt her. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were bright with fresh tears. You were the only real thing in our lives, she said. Everything else was lies and fear and survival. But you, Kevin, you were real. You were good. You were everything we wanted to protect. I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you until the day I actually die. But I can't be your mother anymore. I can't give you what you deserve. All I can do is keep you alive." Then she walked out. I sat alone in the coffee shop for a long time after she left, staring at the envelope in my hands. Through the window, I could see the Santa Fe night, dark and full of stars. Somewhere out there, my mother was driving back to her house, back to her husband, back to her carefully constructed lie of a life. And here I was, holding the wreckage of mine. Eventually, the barista came back out and politely suggested they were closing. I apologized, left a tip, and walked out into the cold. I drove back to my motel in a daze, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like something radioactive. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally opened it. The letters were there, just as she'd said. Dozens of them, each in its own sealed envelope, each marked with a date. I sorted through them carefully. Birthday letters, Christmas letters, graduation letters. There was even one marked for my wedding day, whenever that might happen. I opened the first one, dated my 17th birthday. The handwriting was my father's, neat and precise. "Dear Kevin," it began, "today you turn 17. I should be there with you. We should be eating cake that your mother baked, probably too much frosting. And I should be embarrassing you with some speech about how proud I am of the man you're becoming. Instead, I'm writing this from a place I can't name, living under a name that isn't mine, and the only gift I can give you is my absence. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but I need you to know that I think of you every day. I imagine what you're doing, how you're growing, who you're becoming. I imagine you're angry at me, at us, for dying and leaving you alone. That anger is justified. Be angry. But also know that everything I did because I loved you more than my own life." The letter went on, full of apologies and explanations and small details about memories he cherished. I read it twice, then carefully folded it and put it back in its envelope. I couldn't read any more. Not yet. It was too much. Instead, I turned to the other contents of the envelope. There were bank account details, routing numbers, passwords, documentation of the account my mother had mentioned, sitting there waiting for me to claim it. And beneath that, a thick folder of papers, printouts of what looked like financial records, spreadsheets full of numbers and account names, photocopies of checks and wire transfer receipts, names and dates and dollar amounts, a roadmap of illegal transactions stretching back years. I flipped through page after page, not really understanding most of what I was seeing, but recognizing it for what it was: evidence, proof of crimes, the kind of documentation that could send people to prison or get someone killed, depending on who had it. At the very bottom of the folder was a handwritten note from my father. The date on it was just 3 weeks before his heart attack. "Kevin," it read, "if you're reading this, then you know the truth. I'm sorry for that. I wish you could have lived your whole life believing the lie, safe in your grief, protected by not knowing. But if the truth has found you, then you need to understand what you're holding. These records document years of criminal activity, money laundering, drug proceeds, bribes to public officials. The people involved are dangerous, but they're not untouchable. The evidence here could destroy them if it fell into the right hands. I'm giving it to you not because I want you to become some kind of crusader for justice. I'm giving it to you as protection, as insurance. If anyone ever threatens you, if anyone ever comes after you because of me, this is your shield. Show them you have it. Make them understand that if anything happens to you, it will be released, and they'll back off. That's how their world works. Information is currency, and leverage is survival. Guard this carefully. Trust no one with it. And if you can, if you're strong enough, walk away from all of this. Destroy these records, take the money, and build a life far away from the shadows where your mother and I have lived. Be free in a way we never could be. I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry. Always. Dad. I read the note 3 times, then set it aside and stared at the ceiling of the motel room. My father had given me a weapon, or a shield, or maybe a curse. I wasn't sure which. What I did know was that my life had just become infinitely more complicated. I couldn't just walk away from this. I couldn't pretend I'd never found my mother, never learned the truth, never received this envelope full of secrets and lies and evidence. But I also couldn't go to the police. Everything my mother had said about danger, about people with long memories and no forgiveness, rang true. If I tried to use this information, I'd be painting a target on my back. So what was I supposed to do? I spent the rest of that night lying awake, turning the question over and over in my mind. By the time pale light started seeping through the curtains, I still didn't have an answer. I checked out of the motel early and drove back to Albuquerque. My flight wasn't until evening, so I had most of the day to kill. I found myself driving aimlessly through the city, past strip malls and housing developments, not really seeing any of it. Around noon, I pulled into a public library. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I needed information. I needed to understand what my father had been involved in, who these people were, whether the danger was real or exaggerated. I found a computer in a quiet corner and started searching. I looked up some of the names from the documents my father had left. Not all of them, just a few that had appeared repeatedly. What I found chilled me. One of the names belonged to a man who'd been indicted 6 years ago on federal racketeering charges. He was currently serving 25 years in a maximum security prison. According to news articles, he'd been part of a major drug trafficking organization that operated across the Southwest. Another name belonged to someone who died in what police called a suspicious house fire in El Paso, 3 years after my parents' supposed deaths. The investigation had gone cold. No arrests were ever made. A third name had no criminal record I could find, but several news articles mentioned him as a prominent businessman, owner of multiple car dealerships and real estate holdings across Texas and New Mexico. I sat back from the computer, my hands shaking slightly. This was real, all of it. My father hadn't been paranoid or exaggerating. He'd been involved with genuinely dangerous people, the kind who went to prison or ended up dead, or managed to stay just legitimate-looking enough to avoid scrutiny. And I was now in possession of evidence against them. I thought about what my father had written. Use it as protection, as insurance. But how do you use something like this without triggering exactly the kind of attention you're trying to avoid? I couldn't figure it out. Not there in the library, not on the flight back to Houston, not during the cab ride to my apartment. The envelope sat in my bag like a live grenade, and I had no idea how to safely defuse it. When I got home, I hid it. Not anywhere obvious, not in a safe or a drawer where someone might look. I took it to the storage unit I rented across town, the one where I kept old furniture and boxes of things from my uncle's house after he downsized. I wrapped the envelope in plastic, sealed it in a waterproof container, and buried it at the bottom of a box labeled college textbooks. Then I stacked 3 other boxes on top of it. Not perfect, but better than keeping it in my apartment. The money was a different problem. $200,000 sitting in an account under my name, money that had been stolen from criminals. I couldn't just access it like normal funds. Any large withdrawal or transfer would leave a paper trail, might trigger attention I didn't want. I decided to leave it alone for now. As long as it was sitting there untouched, it wasn't a threat to anyone. And if I ever needed it, if things ever went as wrong as my mother feared they might, it would be there. In the weeks that followed, I tried to return to normal life. I went back to work, back to my routine of coffee shops and bayou runs and quiet evenings in my studio apartment. I told my supervisor the family visit had been fine, left it vague, didn't elaborate. But everything felt different now. I found myself looking over my shoulder on the street, noticing cars that seemed to follow the same route as me, wondering if that person at the coffee shop was really reading their newspaper or watching me. Paranoia, probably. My mother's fear infecting me. But I couldn't shake it. I thought about the letters constantly. I'd only read one, but I knew there were dozens more waiting. My father's voice reaching out from beyond the grave, or from wherever he'd been hiding, trying to bridge a gap that death and lies had carved between us. Part of me wanted to read them all, to consume every word, to hear everything he'd never been able to tell me. But another part was afraid of what they'd say, afraid that they'd make me miss him even worse, or worse, afraid that they'd make me forgive him. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. 2 months after returning from Santa Fe, I received a package at my apartment. No return address, just my name and address in printed labels. Inside was a cell phone, an old flip phone, the kind nobody used anymore, the kind you couldn't trace easily. There was a note with it, typed on plain paper. "Keep this charged. If you need help, turn it on and wait. Someone will call you within an hour. Don't use it for anything else." I knew it was from my mother, or from whoever my father had trusted to help him disappear. The mysterious person on the other end of the phone number she'd mentioned. My lifeline if things went wrong. I charged the phone and kept it in my nightstand drawer, turned off, waiting. Nothing happened. Weeks became months. The paranoia slowly faded, or at least became background noise I could mostly ignore. I started to wonder if maybe I really could just walk away from all of this, pretend none of it had happened, go back to being Kevin Martinez, regular person with a regular life and no dark secrets. Then, one Tuesday evening in August, I got home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. I stood in the hallway, staring at that gap of darkness between the door and the frame, my heart suddenly pounding. I always locked my door, always. And there was no sign of forced entry, no scratches on the lock or splintered wood. Someone had opened it carefully, probably with a key or picks. I should have called the police. That's what a normal person would do. But I wasn't normal anymore. I was the son of a criminal, the keeper of dangerous secrets, the person my mother had warned about exactly this kind of thing. Instead of calling anyone, I turned and walked quickly back to my car. I drove to the storage unit, retrieved the envelope from its hiding place, and sat in my car trying to decide what to do next. The flip phone. My mother had said if I ever felt like I was in danger, call the number. Or in this case, turn on the phone and wait for the call. I dug the phone out of my bag, powered it on, and watched the old green screen flicker to life. The battery icon showed it was still charged. I waited. 15 minutes later, it rang. "Kevin Martinez?" A man's voice, calm and professional. "Yes. Your apartment was compromised. Do not go back there. Do you have the materials?" "The materials?" "The documents your father left you." "Yes, they're with me." "Good. Listen carefully. Drive to the Galleria area. There's a hotel called the Lancaster Suites. Check in under the name James Pearson. Pay cash if possible. Once you're in the room, call this number again." "Wait, who are you? How do I know I can trust you?" "Your father's middle name was Esteban. Your mother makes tamales every Christmas Eve, or she used to, with extra green chile because you liked them spicy. Your first dog was Cisco. When you were 8, you broke your arm falling off a skateboard, and your father carried you 6 blocks to the emergency room because your mother had the car. Trust me or don't, but if you go back to that apartment, there's a good chance you'll be dead by morning." The phone went dead. I sat there shaking, the phone clutched in my hand. Everything he'd said was true. Details no one could know unless my father had told them. Unless they really were who they claimed to be. I started the car and drove toward the Galleria. The Lancaster Suites was nicer than anywhere I'd normally stay, the kind of place business travelers and wealthy tourists preferred. I parked in the attached garage and went to the front desk, giving the name I'd been told to use. The clerk didn't bat an eye, just took my cash deposit and handed me a key card. The room was on the 8th floor, clean and generic and anonymous. I locked the door, engaged the security bar, and called the number from the flip phone. The same man answered on the first ring. "You're there?" "Yes." "Good. Now listen. Someone's been making inquiries about you, about your family history, your father's past employment, your mother's current whereabouts. We don't know who yet, but the inquiries have been traced back to some problematic sources." "What kind of problematic sources?" "The kind your father spent his life running from. Someone knows something or suspects something, and they're digging. The break-in at your apartment was likely surveillance. They were looking for anything that might confirm you have information." "Did they find anything?" "Not unless you left something there." "No, it's all with me." "Then they're probably more curious than certain. But that won't last. Kevin, you need to understand something. The world your father was part of, it doesn't forget and it doesn't forgive. Most of the people he directly worked with are dead or in prison now. But there are others, younger generation, people who've inherited old grudges and old fears. If they think you're a threat, they'll act. So what do I do?" "You have options. The first is to give us the materials. Let us handle it, make it disappear, remove you from the equation entirely. You go back to your life, and we make sure no one has a reason to come after you." "What's the second option?" "The second is to use what you have as leverage. We help you approach certain federal agencies, offer them the evidence in exchange for protection, witness protection, new identity, the whole package. You'd have to leave everything behind, start over completely." "Like my parents did?" "Yes." "And the third option?" "There is no third option." "Well, there's one. Do nothing, hope they lose interest, hope you get lucky, but I don't recommend it." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, my mind racing. Both real options meant giving up my life as Kevin Martinez. Either the evidence disappeared and I was free, but always looking over my shoulder, never quite sure if I was safe, or I disappeared myself, traded one identity for another, repeated my parents' exact pattern. "I need time to think." "You have 24 hours. After that, I can't guarantee your safety. Call this number tomorrow night, same time. Tell me your decision." The line went dead. I spent that night in the hotel room, doors locked, television on for background noise, unable to sleep. I kept thinking about my father's note. Walk away from all of this. Be free in a way we never could be. But how was I supposed to be free when the past kept reaching out to drag me back? By morning, I'd made a decision. Maybe not the smart one, maybe not the safe one, but it was mine. I wasn't going to run, and I wasn't going to hide. I was going to do what my father should have done from the beginning. I was going to tell the truth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.